Welcome to the Ink and Echo podcast, where sometimes my co-host Josh does interviews without me with really cool people that I would have liked to talk to.
Those are always, those are always the best ones when you can't make it, and I get to bring my long hair teddy bear friend Trevor Merchant.
Yeah, I'm a long hair formerly, but not teddy bear. So, well, hey, we're gonna talk about Joel from Charlotte's Web in a minute, but I have something to say, dang it. And I'm going to say it. So we're recording this on Friday, the 7th? What is it? 7th, yeah. And today,
April 7th.
Yeah, today, April 7th, is the day that I was finally able to put my new album up for pre-order and finally able to share a short snippet of what it sounds like. And I'm very happy about that. It's been a long time coming. So
yeah, it's got to be a good feeling. Release there.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, I don't want to say too much about it, but I mean, for one, I'll just say you go to lowercasenoises.com and you can watch a little video that shows you what one of the songs will sound like, and you can pre-order it with a bunch of different packages. And there's actually 4 different vinyl variants if you count the test pressing, which is pretty cool. Something I haven't done before.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing I want to say about it is we talk a lot here about, or at least, I've talked a lot about art and sort of how fans had sort of a weird relationship of people who consume your art and whatever, and the whole money thing involved in it. But I mean, all that aside, like today, so I mean, pure transparency, I don't know if anybody cares. I'm just going to look. So I've had 83 pre-orders today in total since this morning.
Nice.
And most of those are for the higher dollar packages. And I'm just...
Nice.
Yeah. And I'm just honestly blown away and completely thankful that there are so many people who... Because literally the only thing that's out there from this album is 1 minute of it. Not even a full song. And people still feel like they like what I do enough to front a good chunk of money and assume that it's going to be good. So that feels really good. And I am honestly, I'm not trying to be sarcastic or anything like it. I'm super thankful for all those people. And it's cool to move into this next phase of the album where it's finally out of my head and a small group of people around me. So that's all. I'm excited about it. And
that's good, man. That's valuable after your anxiety through the making of this thing. That's a good confidence booster and a good thing to be thankful for, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, there's still things to be anxious about. Like it's a weird, because I'm doing it through a label for the first time. So there's costs that need to be recouped on their end before I actually get any money. And we haven't reached that yet, I don't think. So, I mean, there's things like that. Like we've spent more on this than I have in the past, so we've got to recoup more than I have in the past, so whatever. Right. But I just am really stuck on the fact that people are spending over $100. One of the packages is over $100, and they've only heard a minute of this album, and I think that's crazy, and I'm incredibly thankful. So anyway, lowercasenoises.com.
Well, they believe in your stuff.
Yeah, well, that's what's crazy, and that's why I'm thankful. So thank you to those of you who have done that and who will in the future, and you should if you want to. So,
just curious, how many test pressings will there be? Like, what is typical?
Typical. So for vinyl, what's normal is to be sent. Like, I will be sent 5 test pressings, and I have to listen to all of them. The point being that there might be a flaw in one of the test pressings. And if I do find a flaw, I've got to check it against the other ones and make sure it's not just something with that particular vinyl, or if it's something that's in the master, if it's in all of them.
Okay.
So yeah, I will receive 5.
Kind of time consuming, huh?
That's a terrible point in this process, is I have to listen to this album 5 more times on vinyl attentively.
And you can't just like flippantly put it on in the background. You got to kind of stick with it.
So that won't be fun, but I'll do it. But then we are printing 20 extra ones just because there are people who are super into test pressings on vinyl. And there's
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
It's become a kind of its own thing to be sought after.
Totally. So there's a package called this Swiss Army bundle because the album is called The Swiss Illness. So that's the package that basically has everything: a CD, a black 180 gram vinyl, and like a colored one as well. And then the first 20 people who order that get one of those test pressings. So yeah, Thanks. It's cool.
Perfect. LowerCaseNoises.com. Get over there.
Yeah,
knuckleheads. Yeah. Andy, we have a new patron to thank.
Who's that?
Anissa Gaines. Have you heard of her?
I've never heard of it.
I should say Anissa Tomlinson.
Oh yeah.
I'll say her maiden name first because she's my sister. But she kindly enough, like so many other folks, started supporting the Ink and Echo show on Patreon. And she went top tier, $10 a month, baby.
Wow.
So she's getting a drawing, she's getting her name mentioned on the show, and now she's getting our whole backlog of exclusive content on the Patreon page.
Great.
And
so you too
can do that. And where do they go, Andy?
Well, listen to this. It's crazy. You can go to patreon.com/inkandecho or inkandecho.com/Patreon. And
the tiers are as little as $1 a month. You don't have to go top dog.
Don't go crazy. Don't give up your latte or anything. I mean, you could. Yeah. Thanks, Anissa.
So yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Nisi.
All right, talk about Joel now.
Yeah. Well, our guest today is Joel Stanley, as you probably read from the title, and he is the CEO of Charlotte's Web, also known as CW Hemp. There's kind of a handful of sister companies that go along with that, which he'll get into on the interview. But basically, I mean, I don't want to go too much into it because I kind of spell it all out within the interview itself. But I mean, I only discovered CW Hemp maybe 3 months ago because of the Joe Rogan podcast and started using it myself. Thought it was amazing. Found out they were in Colorado and asked if Joel would be willing to talk to us, and graciously enough, he said yes. So yeah, Trevor and I had an amazing sit down with him.
Yeah, and
really knowledgeable and passionate guy.
Yeah, and you went to him, and so that's why I couldn't be on because we couldn't. It was too much of a pain to patch me in over the internet.
Yeah, like it was probably. I'm sure it was possible, but I was having anxiety and nervousness. I was like, I don't know how he's going to be.
Right.
And he was great. He was totally friendly. It would have been fine. But man, I have to say, as a side note, I love these interviews that are in person so much more than the ones that are patched in over internet, because it's just
there's no delay.
You're there. You can look him in the eyes. You can like judge. What am I trying to say? Like expressions and just anyway, it's so much better being in front of a person, and that's a rarity for us. But I'd like to make that happen more often if possible.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. So I took some Charlotte's Web hemp today. Well, and so here's what it's because I bought some 3 or 4 weeks ago, and for me, well, so okay, my sleep problems have been I've talked about them a lot here, but what I've found is that when I do have problems, it just kind of evens it out. So last night was weird. We had 3 new goats born at our house last night. So I was up from like 1:30 to almost 4 out there helping my wife with the new little goat babies, it was cool. So it wasn't like anything crazy. I mean, it is crazy, whatever. But I woke up this morning, I was like, today's going to be pretty rough. And so I just immediately took one of the, I don't have the oil, I have the capsules. And it just like, I mean, like you guys say on the interview, it's like, it's subtle, but it is still doing something. So like for me, it just helps me get over the hump of being tired. Like it just helps me, like today, it helps me still be productive, even though normally I probably would have been like, okay, well, today's just a wash. I'm not going to be able to do anything today. I would have just given up immediately.
Right.
And then with my sleep, I mean, it kind of does a similar thing. Like either I sleep way better, I don't wake up in the night, or if I do wake up, I have the ability to go back to sleep somewhat soon after
Right.
that, as opposed to waking up at 2 a.m. and being like, well, I guess I'm just up now for the rest of the day. And that's a terrible
Yeah.
feeling. So I'm a proponent. I dig it. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I clearly am as well. I've found my sweet spot in the day seems to be 3 or 4 p.m.
Okay.
for whatever reason, because I've taken it at like 9 a.m. before, and just the effect wasn't as profound. And
Sure.
I don't know if it's just the fact that 3 or 4 is kind of that lull in the day where
Right.
I'm getting off work and kind of like, hitting a dip. And that just gives me a little lift. Whereas ordinarily, I think I've said before, like I'd just come home and grab a beer out of the fridge. But,
Right.
now not even keeping beer in the fridge anymore and just do that instead. Not as a 1-for-1 replacement. I just realized over time, like, wow, this just makes me feel really good through the evening. And then I sleep quite well. So,
Yes.
yeah, it's fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share, one of our listeners actually messaged me personally on Instagram this week. I won't say his name in case he doesn't want to be known. I didn't ask him if I could do this, but he said, I recall in recent episodes the talk about CBD and your experiences with it. Because of that, I decided to try it out and ordered the lower dosage from Charlotte's Web.
That's
It's
what I
done
got,
wonderful
too.
things. Yeah. It has done wonderful things for my anxiety and depression. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say, it had a profound effect. I have tried everything from exercise, diet, pills, self-medicating, prayer, herbs, etc. But this is finally it. Haven't
Wow.
felt this balanced in almost a decade.
Dang.
So
That's awesome.
That's amazing. I mean, I love that he found out about that from our show, but I love more that just Charlotte's Web exists and that
It's
something
working,
helped this
yeah.
guy after 10 years of nothing working.
Right.
So, yeah, that's amazing.
Great.
Clearly, we're fans of this stuff.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
So, well, Joel's going to tell you much more about it. So I hope this episode is educational and fascinating to you as it was to Trevor and I.
Cool.
Joel, greetings. Thank you for doing this with us, man. I have to start with the fact that I was introduced to Charlotte's Web through the Joe Rogan show via Pete Holmes. I respect both those guys a lot. Trevor and I like each of their podcasts.
Very much.
And Pete just spoke so highly of it. And in fact, I hope that you guys saw a little peak in sales because of that, because Joe Rogan has got quite the listenership and dedicated fans. So
There's
anyway,
a few followers there, yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much for having me. I love to talk about what we do. It's a
Right.
big part of my life, and so thank you for your interest in Charlotte's Web and Stanley Brothers and our story.
Yeah, totally. And so I must admit, I was only recently corrected and educated in the fact that Charlotte's Web is not, in fact, CBD, although it does contain CBD. Is that correct? Among hundreds of other cannabinoids, if I'm explaining that right?
So to kind of summarize what Charlotte's Web is, Charlotte's Web is a hemp product that happens to be very rich in CBD. I think that CBD is the main compound that people have taken interest with. It is certainly the cannabinoid that is richest from a specific genetic plant of the cannabis species we use for that product. And so, cannabis is not cannabis, and one variety can be very different than another variety in its phytochemical compound. They all have various levels of different cannabinoids, different terpenes, and that profile can make any given cannabis plant or hemp plant special for any given person for any given reason. And the Charlotte's Web products and the genetics used for those products were really made famous by the story of little Charlotte. She was 5 years old at the time, and this is back in February 2012 when we met Charlotte. Her mom was seeking anything that might work for her. She'd been through every pharmaceutical. She had a catastrophic form of epilepsy, 300 plus grand mal violent seizures every week. And And she had doctors sign off, and her mom found us, said, hey, can you make me some of that CBD that you've been breeding, been working on? She had found out about us, and that was kind of nerve-wracking because Charlotte was 5, but the success was phenomenal, and now there are thousands of little Charlottes, and it's just been an amazing thing to watch what Charlotte's Web and all cannabis. I mean, we've been in this with lots of varieties for a long time, since 2008. I mean, we've seen just amazing things for people, what this plant has the capability to do for various disease states, and just individual health. But that's kind of Charlotte's Web in a nutshell. That's a quick 2-minute version of my last 6 years.
Right. The first time I heard Charlotte's story, I mean, I was in tears, as a lot of people probably are, but I have a 3-year-old daughter myself, and just imagining, of course, as a parent, you put your own kid in that scenario and imagine that you would do anything, to find help. And it's just, it's remarkable that something that grows out of the ground can have that kind of effect.
Modern medicine has kind of gone away from plant-based medicine for, a good century, almost a century, and it's starting to come back. And I believe that cannabis is one of the amazing plants that's leading the charge and bringing us back to whole plant medicine. We've, with pharmaceuticals and such, we've been isolating single molecules like CBD out of a plant, or we've been synthesizing them. Only 25% of our pharmaceuticals come from plants these days, and those are typically isolated molecules. So it's a very unnatural form that we end up with, and the other 75% are synthesized, but usually started with a plant. A good example is some morphine. Morphine still comes from poppy, just as heroin or opium do, but methadone is another opiate that's synthesized. And there's been a lot of debate about it, but some of the best ways that I've heard it explained is that, whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist or some mix between the two, one of two things must have happened here. Either we evolved alongside these plants, or God created them for us. It doesn't matter which one you believe. It's just good science to understand that in many cases our bodies are going to recognize whole plant botanical medicine oftentimes more with less side effects than the isolates or the synthetics. And that's, it shouldn't have surprised us so much that this plant could do all these amazing things, but it has surprised us, I think, because we got a little off track with our scientific methods. Not to say that pharmaceutical development via single compound or synthetics is bad. It's just we kind of ignored what the plants can do for us. And Charlotte's story really brings that home, huh?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, where has CBD or, hemp as something used for wellness, where has it been all this time in the span of human history? I mean, I know it was used for other things in the past, but is this a relatively new use for it?
Well, I would say that it's a rediscovered use. I'm very proud of my family for what they've built here with Charlotte's Web, but some of the pioneers really go back a little ways. Raphael Mechoulam is certainly one of them. He's a professor, University of Tel Aviv, who first synthesized and isolated CBD and THC, and he was running some trials even for epilepsy. I know one was in the 80s. Actually, I think it was 1980 itself. Happened actually in Brazil, and that showed extreme efficacy for a CBD-rich extract. They also did a side-by-side with isolated cannabidiol to our former conversation, and it's amazing the difference that the standardized cannabis extract they used had. I think upwards of 80% efficacy, and the isolated cannabidiol actually didn't have any efficacy from that particular study. So that kind of proves that first point. But let's go back to 1850s. A guy by the name of Dr. O'Shaughnessy out of the UK brought back a cannabis extract from India, and as far as we know, treated the first muscle spasm, convulsive disorder in a child, actually. And they reported efficacy. Now, we don't know what the compounds were that, was that THC rich, was that CBD rich? We don't know, but so this has definitely been around.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So from my perspective, Josh are you a daily user now of Charlotte's Web?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Usually
So
take it
yesterday
about
was
4
the
p.m.
first, sorry to talk
No,
over you.
good.
What were you saying?
Good.
So yesterday was the first time I ever tried it. And Josh gave me one pill and said, just try it. Just take an easy day where you're not, I used to be basically a daily drinker, and I've used cannabis and hemp products to completely quit drinking, actually, about a month ago. And it's been great. It's been really nice. I feel healthier. I feel, I've actually lost some weight, and Josh gave me this Charlotte's Web, and he said, try this. It'll make you feel a little bit better. It'll kind of lighten your mood a little bit. It'll make.
And I specifically said, take it on a day when you don't smoke.
Yeah, don't smoke.
So that you notice
marijuana,
what it does to you.
Don't drink. Don't do anything else. Just try this. And a lot of people know snowboarding is often associated with drinking or smoking pot or whatever. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to try this. And I felt, I don't know if other athletes or anybody who does physical activity has any sort of experience like this, but people talk about the flow sort of state that you get in when you're exercising and you start feeling, your endorphins flowing and everything's kind of clicking. I do a lot of tree runs, and I go through a lot of the trees, and I just noticed, and maybe it was a placebo effect, but I noticed I was able to get into that flow state, and I felt better. I felt more like comfortable in nature. It was kind of interesting, just as a person who deals with anxiety and feels the stress of a daily job, and I'm freelancing now, and it's tough. And so it was nice to be able to take a day away and feel good and kind of get into that comfort level and be able to kind of forget some things a little easier. Yeah. So what have you noticed? That's my first impression, daily impression, or first day impression. What's your daily impression of as a user of Charlotte's Web?
As somebody who frequently has anxiety and depression and used to medicate that with alcohol as well, it gives me a little lift and actually kind of removes that desire for abusing alcohol. And I sleep better. I laugh more easily. And these all kind of came as surprises that it's so subtle and yet very presently noticeable.
So these are kind of
that's a great way to describe it. Subtle but noticeable, and we get these reports all the time for various things. Charlotte, of course, the story was born out of catastrophic epilepsy, but you start to think, we have something that the U.S. government has admitted via patent as a neuroprotectant and an antioxidant. There's a lot of data out there that suggests that it's a powerful anti-inflammatory as well. So you start to think, what are all the things that this can do for a person? And me personally, I don't use high THC cannabis. I just can't. I obviously have no problem with it. I am in that business as well here in Colorado. Excuse me, but the CBD side. So I take Charlotte's Web every day, and I'll be honest, I didn't notice anything. I was like, fine. I know it's good for me. I've seen what this stuff can do. So I'm going to take it as preventative maintenance, and just, really good brain health. But when I stop, that's when I notice. I'm like, well, why the hell do I have this brain fog? Like and I can't make any claims about this. This has to go through an extreme level of scientific rigor before we can make claims, and those claims have to be FDA approved. But I do feel comfortable talking about the testimonials, and my own personal is that I notice an extreme difference in my performance all around when I stop taking.
Yeah, certainly.
Yep.
And is Charlotte's Web currently doing any of that research in order to make claims, or other companies as well? Or is that even up to you? Is that kind of outside of what you guys have to do?
Yeah, so we are. We're going down multiple paths. And until just recently, the only avenue of research that was available to us here in the U.S. Was only observational research. So anecdotal, it's still meaningful data. But we formed the Realm of Caring Foundation shortly after Charlotte and family started moving to Colorado after seeing her story. And it was obvious, we need to find a way to collect this data. And we found some great folks over at Johns Hopkins that said, we'll help you write that research registry and we'll help you interpret that data. And so that's one good platform to say, and that's not just for epilepsy, that's if we find a subset of data within there that talks about anxiety or migraines or whatever it is that people are using cannabis for, and then we can match that with the specific form of cannabis they're using, whether it's Charlotte's Web or not. It actually doesn't have to be Charlotte's Web. Then that tells us what indications do we need to go for and seek FDA approval, which of course is a very expensive, very time-consuming process, but it's certainly worth it. And so we are engaged in that. We have specific studies that we're engaging in. We have a really cool project that I probably shouldn't talk too much about. Part of it's because it's not my department, and I don't want to say anything wrong. But part of it is that I think we're going to unveil it soon. But there's a place in New York called the Center for Discovery. There's a really cool place that's just a big ranch and farm in which the people who live there all have some form of autism. And autism, about 50% of autism comes with seizure disorders. Mm-hmm. And we're starting a project in which these autistic kids, we're going out and teaching them. Actually, some of my brothers are flying out next week to teach them about how to grow this plant. And so these guys, we got a hemp license with the University of Buffalo to do this at the Center for Discovery. And so these kids will be growing kind of their own medicine. They'll send it back to us and we'll turn it into medicine. And those whose doctors and parents want them to try Charlotte's Web, they'll get that opportunity, but they were a part of the whole process. And so that's some research that's happening that has a greater story behind it. We're talking with a university in Colombia, and we have a proposal for a Alzheimer's Parkinson's study, and those are preclinical. So this is in fruit flies and some petri dish type studies.
Gotcha.
And then also looking at diabetes, and we have an excellent relationship with Dr. Stacy Gruber at Harvard University Medical School, McLean Hospital. And she's got excellent brain imaging technology. She was also featured on Sanjay Gupta with us. And she has lots of great ideas, starting with PTSD. So the answer is yes, we're going down that path. It's going to take a long time. I think it is important. Other companies are going down that path, and we encourage them. We applaud them. Because at the end of the day, once we have some FDA approval and it's gone through that level of scientific rigor, we're going to get greater physician advocacy for CBD and for cannabis in general. A lot of the medical community just says, I want to see the data. I want to see that FDA stamp.
Right.
And even if that system's a little broken, according to me, it's the way we get to the greatest good is to get that research done.
Yeah. And it's kind of the best time possible up to this point in history where I imagine even since 2008, our country in general is so much more open to marijuana legalization. Like we're moving in that direction. I know Charlotte's Web is not marijuana, but it is cannabis, and honestly, Charlotte's Web was born out of medical marijuana. A major part of our story is how hemp unfolded and became legal for domestic cultivation. Back when Charlotte's story first came out on YouTube, this is before the big documentaries, before a ton of people knew, word was traveling like wildfire through these epilepsy communities. And these were families that had no other option. They'd been through every pharmaceutical, and they were, basically considered intractable, which is, not treated by conventional drugs. And these folks were moving to us, and we only had medical marijuana as a mechanism. And hemp can be grown under medical marijuana, but obviously not all marijuana can qualify as hemp, based on its THC level. The Sanjay Gupta piece aired in August 2013, and thank God for hemp regulation. That November, Colorado legalized with Amendment 64, and no matter what people want to think about recreational, and I've got my opinions on that side, but no matter what people want to think about that, that's what legalized recreational. That also legalized hemp in Colorado. We had a 15,000 person waiting list with these kids.
And then in 2014, February 2014, Obama signed in to law the Agricultural Act, commonly known as the Farm Bill, which had a hemp provision. And we happened to meet all the criteria at the state and the federal level. And that's what allowed us to scale up, bring this into true agriculture and end that waiting list. And we even were able to send, hundreds of those families who moved here home. So, people call it marijuana, call it hemp, it's all cannabis.
Yeah. And it was a Colorado only company up to that point, up to 2014. Okay.
So that was my big question kind of coming into this is you have an online store, and here in Colorado, if you see most marijuana products or hemp products or anything like that, it's like very strict guidelines of you can't even use a debit card to purchase it. It's so gray still. And so I found that kind of heartening. It's like, okay, this is available to more than just us. And obviously it's doing some good in the world. And I was excited to see that you're able to purchase it online, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. So the Stanley brothers have medical marijuana centers. We have a medical marijuana grow and a manufacturing facility, under those very rigorous regulations. We believe in that side. I've seen high THC cannabis do amazing things for folks, especially folks suffering with side effects from cancer treatments like chemotherapy. So we certainly believe in that, and that is it's a difficult system to scale. You've got an RFID tracking tag on every plant, right? Mm-hmm. It's a very expensive business to be in. Mm-hmm. The ability to go into hemp is what allowed us to go interstate and bring our cost of good down. So when we first priced Charlotte's Web, we knew we had to find some balance between our cost of good and what people could afford. And we set it at actually 5 cents per milligram CBD, which is still what the price is of our highest end product. But that was our cost of good under medical marijuana. Now we have a thriving company with that same price point. It's the lowest price point on the market that I know of, especially at retail. And there's no doubt what we do is the highest quality controlled. And some of that is we've had the time, we were kind of pioneers in this, so we've had the time to build those laboratories and quality systems. But now we're at a place where even at that price point, it's not the greatest margin in the world. Lots of companies out there have better margins, but it still does really well for our company, and it's really ethical for the people. Couldn't have done that without hemp.
Yeah. And that's what I noticed too, is when you first told me about it, we've tried to buy CBD in multiple places across the Denver Metroplex, and it ranges. You can get for really low price point or really high price point, and so anything with CBD in it, it's kind of like a premium tier everywhere I see it. And so when Josh and I were talking about, Emmy, his wife's health issues, and then her using CBD, it's like incredibly expensive to try to get it in any form, and so seeing it at the price point that I saw, when I saw it online, I was like, wow, that's really reasonable compared to what we've been looking at in the past. And for people with health issues, I think people are used to spending way too much money on medication. And it's exciting to see something that does work so well that is finally, costing less than hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month for someone.
And I think we're going to, I know we're going to actually just make that better and better as this industry grows. As it comes out of that gray area that everyone really thinks that hemp is still in, we'll have greater access to more business tools. We've been really restricted. Medical marijuana is extremely restricted. Banking, credit card processing, which landlords you get, and how they gig you. It's difficult to operate in. But as we grow as an industry, we'll bring those costs of good more and more reasonable. But even at my 5 cents per milligram. Mm-hmm. There are I know lots of single moms, and that's a part of our realm of caring nonprofit, is we can identify those folks who truly can't afford it and find a way to still get it in their hands. Mm-hmm.
So how does that work? You have to forgive me. I did zero research coming into this because I wanted to be the blind one, and I wanted Josh to be the daily user that knew what was going on. But what is your foundation and what's your story? It sounds like it's a family business.
Yeah, so the Realm of Caring Foundation, we started in late 2012, mostly in response to, well, we were kind of operating as the Realm of Caring as a family prior. Before CBD took off for epilepsy, we were caregivers before we were required to have dispensaries in the state. So the Stanley brothers had kind of a caregiver's operation. And you probably didn't know us as a patient unless you had cancer. That was what we really, really cared about and really saw a difference in. So we would grow, take some of the best of the flower, wholesale it to dispensaries for the money we needed to build a bigger grow, to take more patients. And we were processing oils for mostly cancer patients. There were a few other disease states that we would work with, but that was kind of the concept is to find a way to utilize the sales of all the sides of this to help the folks that couldn't afford the amounts of different cannabinoids they needed, right? So some people are highly benefit from, $30 a week at a dispensary, and they swear by it for whatever, migraines, anxiety, whatever it is. And then some people like Charlotte, Charlotte's small, but her Charlotte's Web is, I would say it's probably around $150 a month, and some people can't do that. So we built the Realm of Caring to help identify those folks, but also we're a dietary supplement company. We're kind of a hemp food company. When someone calls and says, I have a 3-year-old with intractable epilepsy and she's on all these other drugs, what are the interactions? How do I start this? We can't answer any of those questions per the FDA, per the FTC. We just can't legally, but we can.
Is that getting into the truth claim stuff that only a physician is supposed to make?
Yeah, it's we can't make any claims that aren't approved by the FDA, and then dosing advice. You can come up with a suggested dose as a dietary supplement. But really, people's doctors need to help them with this. And the Realm of Caring, we have a call center in there now that a lot of them are actually moms and dads who moved here from other states or lived here prior, and their kids or they themselves are using it. So now when someone calls in with difficult questions that we can't legally go into, we can connect them with the Realm of Caring, and it will connect them with someone who's been through it. So they can, and nurses, and we have lots of doctor advocates now. In the beginning, it was all voodoo, right? Getting physicians to advocate or believe in it. It's that anecdotal evidence. Once you have 20,000 little Charlottes running around out there, the doctors start to say, okay, we'll believe in this. And the Realm of Caring was built as a resource for all of that.
That's great.
And then, on the price side, and this doesn't just apply to us, but, even some of and I'm not trying to blast any other companies on their pricing. People need to do what they need to do, and we all have a different cost of good. I think we've done very well at the cost of good, but we've been in it a while. But I've known families that say, for me, this is $300 a month, whatever option they're going for, and that's difficult for some families. And then I've also known other families that say this is, whatever, this is, $200 a month, which, that seems like a lot, but I cut out $1,200 a month in my pharma bill, right? So you kind of see both sides of that.
And that's what I was noticing is that you expect to pay for anything rare, any sort of seizure disorder or something like that. It's not a very common medication, so you're expecting to pay $2 to $5 to $10 a pill pretty easily. And so it just, to me, it seemed
for Charlotte herself, for children her age with Dravet syndrome, that's her disease state. There's not one FDA approved drug. So what that means is everything that they've tried for Charlotte and other children with Dravet syndrome is experimental, and it's also off label. So that means that insurance companies typically don't cover it if it's not approved specifically for that disease state, for that indication. So they've paid ungodly amounts of money on those medications that ultimately failed them.
Right. Oh, goodness sakes.
Well, it's an incredible story that you guys have,
Yeah. You guys seem as a family to really have a heart for people. I mean, helping people, that really is kind of the center of all that you're doing, it seems. What do you think that is birthed out of?
My mom,
Yeah.
dude, literally and figuratively.
Right.
My mom and my grandmother. My grandmother really helped raise us, and she's passed recently. Just amazing woman, amazing life. And same with my mom. But we grew up very poor, and I mean, we're definitely human beings, and we've got our mistakes. And trying to run in a business with 6 of your brothers. There's 7 Stanley brothers. We're all in it together. That we have some knockdown, drag out fights. This has been a long road to operate as a family business like that. But I'm super proud of my family. I have to say they're the best people I know. That's no joke. We're still people. I've got kids. I'm as CEO of Charlotte's Web and Stanley Brothers. I think I'm very ethical in what I'm paid and things like that. I think people they'd be surprised. We are a social enterprise, but the truth is, I mean, I'm now experiencing an income in which, the first 5 years of this business was so rough. I had brothers living in grows. That's where I started too. It was really difficult, but it's starting to become a business where we can see a financial future for ourselves. And, I hope to build a college fund for my kids. I'd like to be in a position where if my car breaks down, I know I can fix it.
Right.
And this is providing that. But one of the cool things about that, my family has given back to the business first and has given to the realm of caring first. I can say that about each and every one of them. They're just really good people. And that comes out of who my mom taught us to be. But now we start to see light at the end of the tunnel, and that I can look at my family, and over the last really year and a half, I can look at each one of my brothers and say, everyone's decently taken care of, and no one's starving now, and they've all worked so hard for it. So I'm very proud of them, and we've really ridden that line. To make sure that what we were doing was successful. But I think it was easy. So even if, we got into the industry because we wanted to prove a point, we believed in it. We believed in the plant. But also, it was a business opportunity. I'm an entrepreneur. So I'm not going to lie about that. That was a business opportunity.
Sure.
Once we saw the impact that this plant had, fuck the business. No, fuck the money. It's like, if I die tomorrow, I'm still a young guy, but if I die tomorrow, I'm pretty fortunate and pretty thankful that I got to be a part of this story.
Yeah.
And my impact has been, I've been a part of something this impactful. And so you think about it differently. You're forced to. I'd love to say that we were all just gold souls and all, it always were. These stories change you when you see them and you watch the impact that your products are having, and you start to see life totally differently, which has been an honor just to be a part of that process personally. And I know I speak for my brothers in that too. They all feel that way.
Yeah. And so in preparation for this, I listened to you on Jake Plummer's show, and now he made reference to the fact that you grew up in a conservative Christian home, and I'm just thinking back, like, with the way that cannabis has been demonized in this country for years, like living in Colorado Springs, how did you guys even yourselves personally land on hemp and on this product?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's an interesting dynamic of my family. So we did come from the deep conservative and somewhat charismatic Christian world of Colorado Springs, where Focus on the Family is, and lots of churches. That's where New Life is, and we, most of us, graduated from Colorado Springs Christian School. I'll be honest, I was really, really religious through my 20s, through most of my 20s, and then had some events in my life that kind of changed my attitude. A lot of it still stuck with me, but when we first got into the business, let me back up a little bit. I have to admit, I didn't believe in it 6 months before I got in. My oldest brother, Josh, I'm very proud of him. He was a real pioneer here. Back in 2007, 2008, he started the first dispensary in the city of Denver.
Oh, wow.
And I said, shit, I got to see this. And I was working in the oil field back in Texas. Didn't really like my job, but hey, it paid me well and whatever. I was raising my family there. Josh said, hey, I started a dispensary. I'm like, you're kidding me. So I flew back to meet my brothers for a concert at Red Rocks. John Prine, good show.
Nice.
And I went to see Josh's dispensary, and the first 3 people that walked in after me were cancer patients in various stages with different cancer, and I was able to hear their stories.
Yeah.
I never once thought, I was never a prohibitionist, but I didn't see marijuana as medical. I thought that was kind of a joke, and I'd even made jokes about it. And so I have to admit that that's where I was. I didn't think of the munchies as something that would pull someone through chemotherapy, right? But it does. I've seen that simple fact, and I know so many people that would say that saved their life, their ability to put food in their body and keep it down, and that cannabis was the only thing that helped them do that, helped them sustain and live through some of those harsh treatments, and so that was what sold me, and it was difficult to, I was thinking, well, how am I going to tell my mom I want to go into this now? From a really good job, I want to go into this.
Right.
She was so supportive, helped us. She was one of our first trimmers, and she's a conservative Christian. I would put her that way. But I would say, each brother would have their own answer, and I don't want to answer for them. But I would say, people ask me, "Are you still a Christian?" Mm-hmm. And I would say, if we're going to take the definition from, do I want to be like the guy who it's named after, Jesus? Sure, I hope so. Yeah. I hope I can be called that, because here you've got this guy that just loved everybody, only got abrasive to religious people, and said his only command was to love one another, right? So by that token, I would like to believe that we all are in my family.
Yeah.
Do we go to church? Do we have judgment for whatever, whether it's homosexuality or drugs or whatever? No, we're not Christians, if that's what people are asking when they say, are you a Christian?
Right.
No, I'm definitely not that anymore, but I was. I have to admit,
Sure.
I was a real pious religious guy, and so it was kind of odd. But as we got into the business, I had old mentors that called and said, what the hell are you doing?
I'm sure.
This is wrong. You're doing something wrong. And I would try and explain to them, well, I'm sorry you think that. I used to think that too. But if you come spend some time with me and maybe meet some of the folks that I work with, I have a feeling you'll think differently. And some of these people were people that I happen to know took 3-4 Percocet a night to sleep. But what I was doing was terrible, right? And it's funny. So a lot of those same people, if not all of them, that I've spoken with after Charlotte's story aired, and they took the time to understand it through the eyes of Sanjay Gupta, I got calls and apologies and keep going, you're doing God's work. And so now there's no, what was ever the dilemma between turning a plant into medicine and helping people with it and Christianity or any religion? What was ever that dilemma? It's crazy that there was one, and that we feel like we have to ask that question. Did you feel conflicted as a Christian? Well, yeah, I did, but no, I shouldn't have. That was kind of ignorant. And so it's a long-winded way to answer that. But
no, thank you for that. And I didn't ask out of a critical heart at all. I myself am a believer in Jesus, and kind of like you explained, everybody brings their own definition to the table of what that means, unfortunately, which you can't explain yourself well to everyone. But I would say I've gone through a journey of having my perspective really changed about cannabis, and it's amazing the people who, no judgment, I get it. I used to be this guy, but I know a woman in particular, a young woman who I've recommended your product to, actually, because she has insane migraines. But because of some arbitrary reason that she thinks that Jesus would be upset with her, she won't even try it because it's related to cannabis, and that is insanity to me.
We see that.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that is changing. I mean, certainly it is. We kind of touched on that, but anyway, yeah, it's remarkable, and the fact that pharmaceuticals are accepted, and the alcohol is accepted.
Yeah, we have these. Pharmaceuticals is an interesting thing, and I try not to make enemies there because
Totally.
I believe there's a purpose to everything under the sun, right? There's a time and place for everything. And opioids coming from poppy, these can be very valuable medications. You know, try getting into a brutal car accident or, you know, if you have to have something amputated, you know, God forbid something like that happens to you. The opiates can be kind of the only answer for that momentary time of intense pain. The problem is we as a society now, you know, pass them out like candy for anything, for any backache, menstrual cramps, whatever it is.
Right.
And I've known a lot of people very close to me that have lost decades of their life to opioids.
Yeah.
This is prescription heroin, folks. And it can be valuable, but very few people need it compared to the amount of people out there on it right now. It's dangerous, the people driving out there on it. It's so addictive, and it destroys lives. And
tears up your insides too, often, most of them.
for us to accept that as a culture, but deny cannabis, and cannabis, there's no evidence that cannabis itself is chemically addictive, like an opiate or like nicotine or like alcohol. There's no evidence to suggest that. They say but it's habit forming. Like, well, so is ice cream. You know, so is exercise. You know, sex is actually chemically addictive. Mm-hmm. You actually get this nice release of your body's own equivalent to heroin, oxytocin, serotonin. You know, this chemical cocktail that runs through us. And that's why you see, you know, especially young kids that get attached to each other. Their parents can't keep them apart. They're sneaking out of their windows to get together. It's that's an addictive thing. But here we've got something that's not addictive, not chemically addictive, that appears to have no real health side effects, only positives, and we're still demonizing it. What the hell are we thinking as a species?
Right. On that note, I don't want you to say anything that you'll get in trouble for, but and forgive me, you're probably sick of answering this. Does the Schedule 1 thing affect you guys whatsoever? I mean, have you gotten any government pushback or?
I'm fine to talk completely about that. You know, as hemp, we're actually not technically Schedule 1. Okay. There are government agencies, however, that interpret that we are Schedule 1, right? So the DEA, their official position from 2001 still sits on their website, and it says that any hemp made for human consumption with any detectable level of THC is a controlled substance. They were overruled in a federal court in 2004. It was Hemp Industries Association versus DEA. And the court said, no. The U.S. is the largest importer of hemp products made for human consumption, and all hemp products contain some minor amount of THC. It's kind of like opiates in poppy seed. Mm-hmm. You run the risk if you have too much poppy seed muffin, you can test hot for opiates, right? There's just little fractional amounts, but that doesn't mean poppy seeds are bad. But that is the DEA's position still on all hemp made for human consumption, not just CBD. Now, recently, they made a statement that they've finalized a drug code that they started in 2011 called marijuana extract. It's actually marijuana extract. It's a misspelled term, but anyway.
Well done, government.
Yeah, it's and it includes all cannabinoids, right? Okay. At first, it just included cannabidiol and cannabinol, CBN. But the thing is that DEA doesn't write law. In order to add a controlled substance, you have to go through Congress, Senate, and have the president sign it, because that's changing statute. So DEA's position that's been overruled in the federal court, it's relevant because banks and different services look at it and say, oh, we can't touch this. But the truth is hemp has all of the legal ground in the world to stand on, and people should be very comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, kudos to Congress, Senate, and POTUS, the last POTUS, for signing this. But at the moment, federal agencies actually can't use any funding in the contravention of hemp or marijuana where it's legal in their state and where where those operators are abiding by those state laws. So that's actually, it's illegal for them to go after. But so hemp is totally legal. I hope that helps, clarify a little bit. Hemp is totally legal, but there are certain regulatory agencies that, to be honest, let's be honest, bureaucracies get a mind of their own. I've spoken with many people in these organizations, DEA included, good people. They're not out there to hurt anyone. They look at what's happening with Charlotte's Web and they say, hey, take this through the process we have, and we're in the works of doing that, but it does take a lot of money and a lot of time, to get the FDA to approve one drug for one condition, can be $1 billion, decade-long ordeal.
Yeah. Now
combine that with what we're working with as a whole plant medicine, which only 2 botanical medicines have been approved as a drug, 2 of everything out there. That system was built for single compounds. And so we're kind of in this conundrum in which we've got some old guard that doesn't know what to do with it. The people themselves aren't bad, though. There's
Gotcha.
The activism against it isn't going to work. We need more Charlottes. We need more data. We need to go through the right process, and we'll change their minds. But that's how it's going to happen. I encourage the activists out there to turn their activism into tactivism and really think about, what they're preaching and whether or not they're screaming to get a message across or teaching to get a message across. And so it'll change. Then those minds will change. And I want to say one thing because it's freaking hilarious and shows, if you zoom off our planet and see our elite make decisions, even now, it's got to be comical. Whoever's watching this must be laughing. Because, you look at the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, and the American Medical Association sent a representative, and this is right after Reefer Madness, which came out in 1936, right? Which big industry drove that, and if you listen to Rogan, you've heard this story 1,000 times. You've probably seen The Union. He made a good documentary on this. But the American Medical Association stands up and says, wait a minute. Please don't impose this Marijuana Tax Act. You're going to prohibit a tool that we physicians have in our arsenal. Cannabis extract exists in drugstores throughout America right now. You're going to prohibit us from being able to prescribe it. You're going to prohibit us from being able to study it. They said, well, no, we're going to go ahead with this because we just watched Reefer Madness last night and we're scared to death of this plant. And
Oh my God.
the representative said, okay, if you're going to do it, please use the word cannabis, not a slang term marijuana. And if you're going to use the slang term marijuana, spell it right. There's no H in it. I swear, that's what happened. So here we are, fine day and age, thinking we've got systems and everything figured out. And boy, we're so smart. And right there in our law is a misspelled slang term for this plant. It's just hysterical.
Oh my goodness, that seems to sum us up as a nation, basically. At least the way
Feels about right.
things are run. You guys recently came out with a product for dogs, and Coloradans do love their dogs. But how did this come about?
Since Charlotte's story aired, we used to field all the phone calls ourselves. We didn't have an organization. It was we were very busy. Even my mom was answering the phones at the Realm of Caring. A common question was, "Can I get some of this for my dog?" And I think a lot of the reason why is because the stories then were only surrounding epilepsy, and epilepsy in canines is just as prevalent as it is in humans.
Sure.
And it was painful. I've personally told back then, especially when I was answering phones, I told so many people, look, I love my dog too, and I hear you. And when we get there, yes, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
But we have a growing waiting list for little kids, so I just can't. And people, of course, understand that, but I give it to my dogs. I have 2 older Mountain Bernese, and they're the sweetest dogs on the planet, but their hips are done. And same thing with them. I notice a huge difference if I forget to re-up my supply, which, I know a guy, I should be able to get some Charlotte's Web, right? Yeah. But if I forget to, the way that they hobble, the way they walk, everything is different. And, I'm not making a claim by that, but
sure.
we love our pets, and now that we have the supply, why the hell not? And we hear great success stories coming back out of that.
Yeah. That's amazing.
That's great to know. Marissa's family, my wife's family, has Bernese, and they have for a long time, and they are consistently having hip issues. It's good to know that there's something out there that's gives them a little bit of relief, because I know that they've had very hefty vet bills in the past, with this sort of thing. And they actually lost one of their Bernese to a blood disorder, and that was
we just lost one. I'll show you guys a picture when we're done. We just my kids all huddled around the patron of our Bernese in our family. So we had 2 Bernese, one that we actually inherited with our marijuana grow. When we went to get that property, the people were breeding, and they didn't. This one was antisocial and typical. Well, probably not typical. There are ethical dog breeders out there, but this dog was just had not had a good life. And we said, we want her. And we bred her with my mom's dog, Coda Bear. And so all my brothers and sisters, not all of them, but several of us have Bernese Mountain Dogs, and they're all, well, Coda Bear, we just had to put him down a few weeks ago. He got an aggressive form of cancer, and it just happened overnight. And he was an old dog, but they're such a great breed. My kids put mine through hell, pulling their hair, and just nothing but sweet.
Right.
They are great.
Go
ahead.
Yeah. Did you have to tweak the recipe, so to speak, at all for dogs?
So, Purina has actually been formulating with MCT. MCT is one of the carriers we use. It's the product I take. I take the hemp extract infused into MCT. That's medium chain triglyceride. It's a fractionated coconut oil. So basically, your coconut oil, when it sits at the right temperature and it looks like half of it's liquid, right? That's predominantly MCT. It's very good for you.
Interesting.
And Purina has been doing studies on MCT alone that show cognitive benefits for dogs.
Wow.
So it made perfect sense to have, here's our neuroprotectant hemp stuff, or according to the U.S. government, neuroprotectant. Patent number I forget, but you mix that with another known cognitive beneficiary, and that just makes sense. So our product is called PAWS, P-A-W-S. It's kind of cute, and I'm not the marketing guy, so I don't do any of that. Can't take any of that credit, but it's in MCT and very similar to what I take daily.
Yeah.
So you mentioned patent, and I had this question a while back, but I didn't want to interrupt. How do you guys protect your intellectual property? I was curious to see, with pharmaceutical companies the way they are, and with the direction that the United States is going. It seems like pharmaceutical companies are going to start to get into this pretty heavily.
That's a really good question. And on the business side, to take it more into the mind and out of the heart on that, I'm going to impose my heart on it. I hate that we even have to have this conversation. The way that patents lock great things out and end up driving prices up and things like that. But so we have filed patents both for plant genetics and for some of our processes. And the reason why is to protect ourselves from other business interests that come in and lock us out of what we invented because we didn't file a stupid patent. So we have to do that. It's one of those necessary evils. We have significant attorney bills over these things, and that's why we do it, is to protect ourselves. We're not much for hoarding, and I don't see us ever in for, if someone legitimately stole something we were doing, and maybe we would enforce a patent. I just don't see it ever coming to that. But we do have to file for patents because that's the way of the world right now. Yep. And it's just an added expense. Throw that into the cost of good, really. What's most important to us, the IP that we care about protecting, are the trademarks. We've had so many people that were willing to throw anything in a bottle and call it Charlotte's Web after Sanjay Gupta did his piece. Well, one, we tested many of these things to find out what the hell are these people doing. Almost all of them never had any CBD in them. Some of them had really high THC, and people are going to buy it thinking it's ours and give it to a kid. And we had I think the cannabis pot culture doesn't understand trademarks and IP. We've had people blast us. I've had people scream at me walking into some building to go speak somewhere that I was selfish for filing a trademark on something I named. My brother John and I named that after Little Charlotte. And the reason for trademarks and that type of IP protection is not just for me as a business owner. It's for the consumer to have the right to verify the source of a good. Yeah. And when you have a good that can impact a life like that, they have every right to know that it is what the marketer says it is and that it came from the source that they thought it was coming from. We've had to send so many cease and desists and things like that. But, IP protection is important, and that's just because we're in a flawed world. Ideally, we'd all really share the tech and see who comes up with great things to help people and keep competing in that way. But
we see so much of that in Colorado right now. There's so much innovation happening here because Amendment 64 was passed and there was such a huge growth in the market. It's interesting to see, every time I walk into a dispensary, there's different stuff. There's different stuff to look at. There's new products, and now what I'm seeing more and more of is CBD on the shelves, and more of that. And I talk to my friends in California and Washington. I have family in both states, and now it's legal in both places. And I ask them, have you tried CBD? Have you gotten your hands on it? And they're like, what's CBD? And everybody I talk to in Colorado that has any affiliation with hemp or cannabis at all is like, yeah, it's been great. It's helped me with this. And I love hearing those stories and being able to share them and telling my friends in other states that, hey, go find this because it's great.
And back in 2012, I knew one other group in the industry right here in Denver that even knew what CBD was, right? The whole industry. Paige Figge, Charlotte's mom, she had found CBD. She had found the research on it. That's what she was looking for. She went dispensary to dispensary, and most people, these were people that have been in the industry since it was illegal. These are some older people that have been doing this since the 70s, and they're like, CB what? And, very few people could even pronounce the word cannabidiol back then. And now it's becoming a little household, which is really good. I know that our story had something to do with that, but it's important that we have these businesses, pharmaceuticals too, GW Pharmaceuticals. They're developing some pharmaceuticals. We're not against that. The sheer amount of options we need of various cannabinoids, the CBN too. So cannabinol.
So I've never heard of
cannabigerol, CBG.
What is CBN and CBG? I haven't heard.
So CBN, that's a good example. It's one of the more known cannabinoids. Really, 3 have been known and understood in the last 5 years. CBD was a latecomer to it, but THC, we all know THC, CBN, which is cannabinol, and CBD, cannabidiol, and CBN is really, it's a degradation product of THC. So THC starts as an acidic form, THCA, tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, in the plant, and that's actually non-psychoactive. Mm-hmm. When you heat it up, a carboxyl atom breaks off of the molecule, which just becomes CO2 basically up, off into the air. All of a sudden, this molecule becomes very psychoactive. There's CBD has that same biological precursor, cannabidiolic acid or CBDA. Once you heat it up and activate it, then it becomes CBD. CBN, THC actually degrades on the plant and under certain circumstances into CBN. And CBN is believed to be, and I believe it to be, we're also developing some CBN products, a sedative. Right, so it's got more of the effects like valerian root and melatonin combined, things like this, nice. But not that psychoactivity, not like getting high. It's just more of a sleep aid, and so I'm excited about that one. I'm excited about what we're going to develop and what other companies are going to develop with CBN, CBG. I haven't looked into CBG for a little while. It's on our radar. We breed these cannabinoids up in these plants through selective breeding, Mendelian breeding. It's not like genetic modification, but it's just the same way tomatoes are bred for pest resistance or size or color or taste or whatever. So we breed these cannabinoids up, but cannabigerol is CBG, cannabichromene is CBC, and those, if you go look those up, go look at PubMed, mm-hmm. There's already some research being done on those, which is a great thing. So competition is necessary for this industry to develop the tools that we're all going to need. Because even, Charlotte's Web, I've always been honest about this. From the very beginning, people call and say, if I move out there, will this work? Boy, what a question. And you want to say yes, but I'd say, you know what? Here's how many people we've seen. Here's how many people are staying here because it's working. Yeah. So there's no guarantees. It wasn't everyone's silver bullet. And we've referred folks that have been out of options. Hey, if Charlotte's Web didn't provide everything you needed, try some other cannabis options, because they're not all created equal, and what works for Charlotte may not work for another person. And those options are so important.
Yeah, totally. What has been one of the most surprising things that someone has come back and reported that it helped with?
Besides erectile dysfunction? No, I'm just kidding. Maybe, you never know. Let's see. The most surprising to me, I've been really surprised at the amount of people coming back and saying anxiety. Yeah. Pete Holmes, you mentioned Pete Holmes. He's one of them. He's actually who texted me this morning and said, "Do you want me to, how do you want me to release this podcast?" But anxiety was one of them for him. And while it's not that way for me personally, and maybe I just wasn't struggling with much anxiety. There have been way too many people that have come back and said, "This is it. This is what's done it for me, giving me my life back." Yeah. And I'm like, really? Seriously? I'd say that one has surprised me the most. The various neurological disorders that people come back and report, I'm not too surprised after seeing what it did for Charlotte and lots of folks like her. But that anxiety side, it's odd. Boy, what a problem we face, whether it's PTSD or general anxiety. Why it's doing it? No idea. So what the mechanism of action? No clue. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? We've been prohibited from researching this for the last century. So we haven't used our modern scientific tools to understand what these mechanisms of action are. But to put that into perspective, almost all of the anti-epileptic drugs out there, right, were not made for epilepsy. And when you look at mechanism of action in the Merck index, it says unknown. So these are things that have gone through all that scientific rigor to become FDA approved for something. Right. And we still don't understand the mechanism of action. This is brain science here on something like anxiety. I mean, why people are reporting this? Jeez.
Well, psychology. So I'm a filmmaker, but my undergrad was psychology. So I know very little about either. But it's interesting when people that are outside of psychology or haven't had even college level classes on it, they don't realize that for a long time, psychology was not even really a science. It was still, everything was observational. It's like everyone basically lies on all their surveys. And so most of the data didn't really work. And so it's interesting now that it has become a hard science and there is real research being done, how much psychiatrists, and I don't mean to throw them under the bus, they tend to just prescribe whatever sounds good, and whatever medication comes to mind in terms of like, oh, that'll probably work. And I have, multiple family members with bipolar disorder, and they're manic at times and depressed at others. And it's really tough on our family. And they've been prescribed many, many different medications for a number of different reasons. And you realize that a lot of that just hasn't been researched as much as it should. And there isn't as much hard science in that area as you'd like. And it's nice to know that at least now we're getting there. And there is an opportunity for, hemp to be a great option for these disorders, because we don't have a lot of great options for other.
That's right. And many of them are very addictive.
Exactly.
And very toxic. I mean, you look at things like Xanax, benzodiazepines that are used for sleep, for muscle spasms, for epilepsy. These are extremely addictive. They play on the same receptor sites as alcohol. If you've been on them for too long and you try and quit cold turkey, that can kill you, just like alcohol. And those are commonly used. And here we've got something we don't know why it works, just like we don't know why benzodiazepines work, but we don't have the science we want. But there's two parts of that, and you just hit the nail on the head, I think. One, we as a species don't have the tools to understand things the way that we ultimately want to, and that's okay. We're learning, we're growing. And two, it's been prohibited. So now that it has access to the tools and good researchers, and guys like Johns Hopkins and Harvard are now saying, oh, we want to study, we want to know what's happening here. What we're going to find out in the next decade or two about cannabinoids and cannabinoid therapies, it's going to be mind-blowing.
Right.
It's exciting.
We finally have some way to measure what the brain is doing, and not as much as, like you said, not as much as we'd like, but I think we're poised to see some great growth, not just in the industry, but also for patients and to have better outcomes.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. Super educational and interesting, and I know our listeners will appreciate it. We in general are proponents of your product, and because we've talked about it on our show, and we have had listeners tell us that they've bought it and loved it. But it was just such a beautiful, perfect storm that I even found out about you guys, because my wife had been recommended CBD from a different company just a few months before I heard Pete Holmes talk about you guys. Come to find out, not only are you in Colorado, but I live 5 miles away.
Nice.
So it's just, so it's a great honor that you were willing to do this with us. So
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. And I know, when we get talking about it, I can be like a drink from a fire hydrant, but we love this. We're willing to talk about it anytime. And, let's schedule another one of these days, and let's let some stuff unfold. Maybe some of that research, maybe some more political craziness we can get together and talk about. But also look out for coming out soon is my brother Jesse and I went on Pete Holmes. You made a weird podcast.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun, but you guys will find it interesting. We admitted some things that I normally wouldn't, but
okay. Pete will get you there. He's Mr. Vulnerable Man.
We threw it out, even down into, because we're into plant medicine in general, and that includes other forms of plant medicine that are similar to cannabis, even though I can't do cannabis, but, the more shamanistic entheogens. Yeah. And we went deep into that and Jesus at the same time. It was really interesting. So if you like Pete Holmes, I would say look for that one coming out. It's probably going to be pretty funny.
Right. I'd say there's some crossover from our listeners to them. He's much larger than our show, but anyway, that's amazing. Well, Joel, thank you again.
Yes. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, Josh and Trevor too, I guess. Good job. You did a good job.
Thank you. It helped that Joel was really passionate about the product and his company and helping people and all that. Because if we'd walked in and he gave one-word answers, it would have been a much shorter talk and far less interesting. But
one thing I kept thinking of through that, because Joel, obviously, it sounds like they're all just really great people trying to do a really good thing. And I just couldn't help but think, and we don't normally get that political or whatever, but the new Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, I keep thinking about what he said about marijuana. I don't know if you know this, but
I don't.
He literally said at the end of a quote, and this is in front of the Senate, I believe. He was testifying in front of the Senate. He said, literally, quote, "Good people don't smoke marijuana," unquote, which is just the most insane thing to say about it, I feel. But just, I don't know what else to say.
That's pretty shallow-minded there.
Just so broad, so ignorant, I would say, about it. And I only say that because it ties into the hemp thing, and you guys talked about how it, people put those things together when they shouldn't. And, marijuana is a whole other thing that I think is ridiculous the way it's viewed. But it blows my mind. Like if Jeff Sessions could sit down with Joel and be like, look, and see that this guy's honestly trying to do a really good thing for people and it's working, like, how can you say something like that? Like, just, it blows my mind. It's crazy. I don't know what's wrong with people.
Yeah. And there's a lot I could say about that, which I probably don't need to, but it's just, that's not even a like formal or professional statement. That's just an opinion. And
right.
It's bringing in morality, which doesn't really make sense. And anyway, that's absurd.
Anyway, You should stick it to Jeff Sessions and go to cwhemp.com. Not that it's not marijuana, but I bet he would say something similar about hemp and be all weird about it. Anyway.
Good people don't use hemp. That's what he'd say. Well, we must be bad people because it's fantastic stuff. But yes, please do go to cwhemp.com. Just stick it to that Jeff Sessions.
Stick it to that man.
I mean, if we haven't convinced you enough by this point, I guess we're probably not going to, but please go and try some for thyself.
And if you're really interested in being adventurous, smoke some weed and watch Fast and the Furious. Might be a really cool experience. I don't know.
Yeah, a ridiculous movie suddenly becomes an amazing movie, and you're like, yes, that's so true. Chris the Rock Johnson, or whatever his name is.
Paul Walker, is that his name?
No, The Rock.
The Rock is later in the franchise. I'm talking about the early ones, dude. Gosh. The new Fast and Furious movie looks so good. I want to watch it pretty bad. Is this what you want to talk about right now?
Killer. Anyway, this has been Ink and Echo number 36. Joel, thank you for being on the show. Good people don't listen to Ink and Echo.
It's true. It's true. You guys all suck.
Good boys, I should say. Good boys do listen, but good people don't.
Right. Got it. Nailed it.